Happy Exoween! I mean Halloween, everyone. D Square here. Going to be doing a spooktacular Halloween special for you. You know, when you think of Halloween, you think of scary things. And I know the top two things that I think are scary are vampires with their superhuman abilities and curses are particularly nasty. And we have an X-Men story that deals with both. It's X-Men Curse of the Mutants. That's right. And this is an X-Men versus vampire story. How exciting is that? I mean, you know, I can't think of any better way to have a spooktacular story than to involve vampires, particularly the son of Dracula, Zarius. That's right. So, this whole story starts when someone that looks a cross between the Gimp from Pulp Fiction and Doomsday from Superman, he walks up to a cafe where Jubilee and Pixie just so happen to be enjoying some lunch, tea, coffee, what have you. He then rips off his jacket, which is quite creepy seeing as he looks like the Gimp, but nonetheless he rips off his jacket and then boom, there's an explosion. Pixie and Jubilee are in pretty close proximity, so Pixie's pretty much unscathed, but Jubilee gets hit with a lot of blood. She is taken back to the X-Mansion where Pixie briefs the rest of the X-Men, particularly Cyclops, their leader, on what happened at the park. It was originally thought that it was a bomb. Wolverine assumes it's Al-Qaeda, which shows you how topical the X-Men can be. But Pixie explains it was no bomb. This person just exploded and blood sprayed everywhere. Well, Dr. Nemesis and the rest of the very smart X-Men figure out that unfortunately Wolverine is infected. And the X-Men, they pretty much know what's going on here. They have some sort of vampire trouble. So they sent out a scout team, particularly Wolverine, who goes back to the scene of the crime and tracks the blood to a nearby vampire safe house. Now there's only one vampire in the safe house, so after Wolverine takes out some familiars and chops the head off of the vampire, he then reports to Cyclops that he has found a vampire safe house, and this unfortunately means that the vampires, they have a beachhead in the city of San Francisco. You know, now that the X-Men know that they have a vampire problem, you know, they send out a scout team to find these vampires. They do indeed find a, horde of vampires under San Francisco. They have a cool fight with the vampires. But another cool thing that happens is vampires, Marvel, what comes to mind? Blade! That's right. Blade is also tracking these vampires and actually gives the X-Men a hand, and he is pretty much a part of this story until the end. The X-Men regard him, of course, as an essential resource because he knows a hell of a lot about vampires. Once they regroup back in Utopia, which of course is the X-Men's new home, because the city of San Francisco has welcomed them and given them refuge, and boom, they are now San Francisco residents in an island called Utopia. So they back in Utopia here, they get this bright idea that, hey, we have Cerebro, we can program it to find mutants, we can program it to find humans, perhaps we can program it to find vampires. They do this successfully, but unfortunately learned this city is filled with vampires. Absolutely filled. And as I mentioned earlier, Jubilee did get infected. She eventually succumbs to her urge. She leaves Utopia and searches out Zarius and pretty much becomes one of his vampire concubines. Now what we find out was this was Zarius' plan all along. He wanted to infect Jubilee so that she would come to him. And then who would follow Jubilee? Wolverine, of course. So Wolverine does exactly that. He tracks down Jubilee by himself, finds himself dead center in the middle of the vampires, fortress basically underground. He is overwhelmed and turned into a vampire himself. Alright, so the table is set here. San Francisco is full of vampires. Jubilee has been turned into a vampire and she has joined Xeris. Wolverine went after her and got himself turned into a vampire. So we've got a huge problem here. Thankfully, the X-Men do at least have Blade, who is a wealth of knowledge in all things vampires, and they certainly use that knowledge. And if this is Cyclops and the X-Men we're talking about here, this comic does a great job of showing you how Cyclops' strategic mind works. There is no shortage of plans that he can come up with to try and counteract this vampire menace that has now engulfed all of San Francisco. And one of those plans is to resurrect Count Dracula. That's right. The ruler of the vampires, he's been defeated, and now his son is ruling over all the vampire sects. He's even combined them. They've all joined forces like Dracula has never been done before. Now, Blade heavily protests this move, but Cyclops, has deduced that if we revive Count Dracula, he's not going to be happy with his son sitting on his throne. So, although Blade protests, he does ultimately advise them on how to make this happen. He helps them to find the body, but of course they need the head as well, because they need to take the body and the head, put them back together again, and take out the stake in Dracula's heart. It turns out the head is somewhere underwater in Atlantis. But thankfully, Namor, he just, he's a mutant and he's an active X-Men member at this time. So he's able to retrieve the head, and then they go about their business of rejoining the head with the body, pulling out the stake, informing Dracula of the current situation, and then they just let him go to do his thing. At this point, Cyclops does a really pimp move. Somehow, perhaps with Forge helps or whoever, he's actually able to beam a message right down to Xeris in his vampire lair. They're basically chiding each other. Cyclops is on the screen. Xeris is explaining to his grand plan, hey, mutants and vampires are actually brothers, so let's join forces, let's become mutant vampires, and make this beautiful, wonderful moment, and, of course, rule the world. Cyclops isn't having any of it, and he talks mad shit to Xeris and says, okay, you want a grand and beautiful moment? No problem. You are going to be in charge of the greatest vampire slaughter that has ever been. Xarius then, I keep calling him Xarius, it's Xaris, but anyway, Xaris then shows Cyclops, hey look, I got Wolverine, and he's a vampire now. And of course Wolverine talks a little bit of shit to Cyclops. What happens immediately after this is the vampires attack full force. Now, one of Xarius' strategic vampires does explain to him, like, we really should wait. I know you want to get the element surprise, but we're not full force right now. Xarius doesn't listen, and he orders the vampire invasion of Utopia. The X-Men see this coming, so they get all of their hard skins outside of Utopia to meet this force. So you've got Rockslide, Colossus, Emma Frost, Husk. Archangel is out there. He can, of course, go from Angel to Archangel, so he's flying around rather protected. Cyclops himself also joins the fight. Emma tries to talk him out of it, but it's Cyclops. He's the leader. He's going to be out there. That way he keeps everything in line. The mutants do a good job of propelling the vampire force. Now what happens next is the vampires fly Wolverine in. And that's a frightening thought. A vampire Wolverine, for sure. But we see where another plan of Cyclops comes to fruition. And that is Cyclops implanted something in Wolverine that would turn his healing factor off. And this is why Wolverine's healing factor didn't fight off the vampirism. With a simple click of a button, Wolverine's healing factor is restored. He is now no longer a vampire, joins the side of his X-Men, and they begin to wipe the floor with the rest of the vampire invading force. Zarus, of course, orders another wave, but what did I just say? They rushed it. They wanted to catch him off surprise. They weren't at full force, and he is informed that there is no second wave to send against the mutants. So the X-Men repel the invading vampiric army. The army and Zarus's forces are in shambles. And of course, Dracula shows up in Zarus's hideout. Daddy is back. And, you know, he looks around, congratulates his son for uniting all the different vampire sects. He offers amnesty to all of them, says, hey, I'm back, no hard feelings. You know, you can regard me as your leader now, no problem. And they pretty much do that. Of course, Zarus takes exception to this, and that's where he and his father, Count Dracula, they start to fight. Dracula is, of course, stronger than his son Zarus, and he attempts and is successful at ripping his head off. It's really a cool moment. Zarus, up to this point, has been very cocky, very arrogant, and to see his father, Count Dracula, one of Scott Summers' plans at this point, coming to fruition in a successful way, tearing his own son's head off, taking control back of the vampires. It's a really, really cool scene to see. Now the X-Men, they also show up, you know, after the fight. They know what happened. Cyclops talks to Dracula and says, okay, you know what? You did what I wanted you to do, so no harm, no foul. Go about your business and, you know, don't disturb us. But, you know, we see you again, bad things could happen. This, of course, makes Blade really, really mad. Blade is not about to let Count Dracula, you know, ruler of the vampires, walk out of here alive. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a choice. He starts to step up to Dracula, and Cyclops hits him in his spine with an optic blast because, again, Cyclops wants to make good on his deal with Dracula, so he does have to take Blade out. Dracula then starts to get cocky, kind of acts like I could maybe take you all out right now. And Cyclops is like, listen, buddy, we're the X-Men, we've got super intelligent mutants, we had your body for 17 hours. Do you really think we just put you back together without installing some sort of safety measure? Dracula gets the point, and so he drops his whole arrogance and threatening manner, and he actually returns Jubilee to them. He says, she's relatively unharmed. Here you go, you can have her. Now, she is still a vampire, though, and that's how this story concludes. So there you have it. An awesome story. X-Men versus vampires. They team up with Blade. They even team up with Dracula in a roundabout sort of way. So very, very, very interesting story to start this, you know, X-Men run that, you know, pretty much happened after Dark Reign. I hope you enjoyed my Halloween Spooktacular special of X-Men: The Curse of the Mutants. You can always, of course, you know, go on my Twitter and tweet at me at @dsquare72. I'm doing a spooky stream of Castlevania Symphony of the Night on my Twitch. So, of course, that's twitch.tv/dsquare. Also, go to superheroespeak.com. They've been gracious enough to let me do some comic book reviews on there. I did Bloodshot #1, Mirage #2. Also did The Life and Death of Toyo Harado. So go check out superheroespeak.com as well. Until next time, guys, peace and love, and we'll see you again soon.